Billboard behind me here is a retired ad. We know somebody who works for a local billboard company here, and they gave us this. They're just going to throw it away. And what we've done is we've hung this across this chain link fence so that we can get up close and personal and actually see what the printing looks like for this. Let's first quickly talk about PPI versus DPI, pixels per inch versus dots per inch. Pixels per inch is actually what we're looking at on our computer screen, or it's what our digital cameras are actually capturing. How many pixels are actually in an inch of this image that make up the overall shot? Now, a lot of people use the term DPI instead of PPI, but technically that's not actually correct. PPI is pixels, DPI is dots per inch, and DPI is specifically talking about the dots of ink that printers use to make up pixels. So for example, you may have a single pixel in one of your images that's a very specific color, but your printer only has 4 different colors, CMYK. Now, to create that individual pixel and to recreate that specialized color, your printer is going to be dropping little bitty dots of ink to recreate that color. Basically, your printer's resolution usually is going to remain constant. It's going to be able to produce a certain amount of dots per inch, whereas your image resolution may change wildly depending on the camera or the file that you actually send to print. What's really cool is you can actually see what I'm talking about in this giant print behind me. Come over here and look at this. So let's first look at this giant number 4 here. This one is pretty interesting because we can see pixels per inch and we can see dots per inch as well. Let's first start with pixels per inch. That's what all photographers should understand. And we can easily see the size of the pixels if we look down this angled line of this number 4 here. You can see these stair steps where it's actually creating each one of these pixels. And of course, if we had more megapixels to create this number 4 here, this would be a much smoother line. And of course, if we just take a few steps back, this looks perfectly smooth. But when we get up close here, we can see just how big these pixels are. From a distance, this number 4 just looks like it's made up of gray paint. But when we actually start looking much more closely, we can easily see that this gray color is made up of cyan, yellow, and magenta colors. Very, very interesting. Another thing that you'll notice is the actual tarp that this is printed on. This is not some super high-end photo paper here. This is just standard tarp material that you might buy at Walmart to cover a car with. And you can see that there are ridges throughout this entire thing. And you'll also notice that the way the ink falls on this, you will see some banding as well. Here in the yellow area of the print, you can actually see the dots even more clearly, and that's because the majority of this color is just made up with yellow ink. And together, again, when you step back, it all blends together and makes it look like one solid color. So it's probably pretty obvious to you now that billboards in particular aren't the highest resolution. And the reason for that is viewing distance. So many photographers completely overlook the idea of viewing distance and how much the human eye can actually resolve. There's actually an equation that we can use to figure this out. Here in my hand, I've got an old 4x6 print that Patrick actually took years ago for one of his clients. Let's try to use this equation to figure out how much resolution we would need to look at this picture from about 2 feet away. First, what we're going to do is we're going to take the distance in inches, which at 2 feet would be 24, times that by 0.000291. We're then going to divide that number by 2, and then we're going to take 1 and divide it by the number that we just came up with. And that's going to come up with 286 PPI, or pixels per inch, and that's what most photographers are accustomed to. We print relatively small images. We want to be able to see them at about 2 feet of distance, and right around 300 PPI is perfect for that type of shot. You can actually check out this chart here with viewing distance and minimum resolution, and you can see as we move further away, the DPI drops significantly. So if we're looking at a 4x6 print specifically, and we know that this needs to be right around 300 pixels per inch, we can figure out the math, and we know that this picture only needs to be 2 megapixels. Any more resolution than that, and the human eye would not be able to decipher it. So let's specifically talk about the billboard that we have hung up behind me here. We're approximately 150 feet away from this thing, and most billboards are viewed from 500 to 2,500 feet away. If we look at the chart that I showed you earlier, you can see here that 50 meters or 160 feet, all you need is 4 pixels per inch. That means from this distance, you hardly need any resolution at all, and we are significantly closer to this billboard than the average person driving down a highway. So here's one final way for you to think about this. In my hand here, I have the same 4x6 print. We know that this thing is printed at 300 pixels per inch, and we know that this is approximately 2 megapixels to fill up this piece of paper here. If I turn around and I hold this at arm's length, I can see that although it's not quite as wide as the billboard, it's actually taller than the billboard. So we could use the exact same pixels needed to create this small little print in my hand here, and we would have a super sharp looking image from this distance. If we got even further away, like the average viewer driving down the highway, you would need significantly less resolution. What this means is that the average billboard, in many cases, needs much less than 2 megapixels to actually get a sharp looking shot. So then you may be asking, why in the world do we need this many megapixels? And the truth is, for 99% of what photographers do, we don't. But it's nice to be able to crop in, it's nice having all of that extra resolution to work with. And if you're the type of photographer who does print fine art, or you're printing posters that might show up in subways, certain types of advertisements actually do require the subject to walk up close to it. Having that extra resolution is nice. So if you're one of those photographers who loves using the excuse about why you need that brand new camera just so you're ready to shoot a billboard like this, it's not a legitimate excuse anymore, guys. Maybe you need a high resolution camera for something else, but not billboards.